Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Speak the Truth. We're going to be going over Iran and all the things that are going down over there. For some reason, Donald Trump thinks it's a good idea to extend the ceasefire. I personally don't understand what the hell he's thinking or why he's doing it the way in which he's doing. But last night, he ended up saying that Iran is fractured. Iran, that's right. Not the United States, nothing to do with anybody else, but it's Iran that's fractured. So we've got to worry about them. Right? No, that's not necessarily the case. In my personal opinion, it has more things likely to do with, I don't know, let's say us not having enough assets in the region. Iran is coming out with brand new threats telling us that we need to be concerned with the fiber optic cables that are now running through the Strait of Hormuz. They're threatening to take all of those and blow them to hell. And in addition to Iran wanting to do that, they also took over 2 merchant vessels over inside of the Red Sea today. You can't make that crap up. Yes, that's right. They took over 2 merchant vessels inside of the Red Sea. That within itself is a bit of a problem. We're going to get into all that and a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and roll this intro video. Somebody needs to get Iran under control and take away AI from them, because ever since Iran discovered AI, they've been putting out the crappiest of the AI videos. And this is an example of one of the trolls they put out yesterday. Yeah, it's definitely what he said was it was going to get extended at Pakistan's request, but that's just not it. You guys can't hear the video itself. Of course, you can't hear the freaking video. Why would you guys be able to hear the video? No sound. Am I muted or is it just the clips? Because if it's just the clips, I'm very, very sorry about that. I started using, I went over to StreamYard today, so it's given me I guess, a bit of problems, but we'll go ahead and make that work. And I appreciate you guys for hanging out with me as I try to figure that out. If you guys need to hear it, I suppose I can just add that real quick and you guys will be able to hear it. So let's go ahead and get that one up there so that you guys can, in fact, hear it. Here, you guys want to hear it? You guys want to hear it? Now you can hear it. Here you go.
We are having very great negotiations with Iran. If Iran doesn't come to negotiate, we're going to bomb them.
2,000 years later.
So where are the Iranians?
This is from Iran.
All right. Then I will extend the ceasefire at Pakistan's request.
Wow. Good job, Iran. Good freaking job. Well, before we get into everything that's going on over there, first thing I'm going to end up bringing up for you guys is travel.gov actually ended up putting out a, how do I want to say, brand new warning. I don't even know what to call this dang thing. But it's a security alert for Iran. They're saying that Iran can, how do I want to say this? Iran, you can now travel through Iranian airspace. So Iranian airspace is now open, limited to some freaking places. It's not an audio guy. I really appreciate you. It's actually an update in Streamlabs or something that's wrong with it. For some reason, it's not syncing with YouTube. So I jumped over to StreamYard real quick, paid $50 so that we could actually jump in here and do this because I'm dual streaming over to X as well as over here on YouTube. But I canceled the dual stream, came back in here, and tried to do it this way. And even then it didn't work. So for all of you guys that are giving me crap right now, I'd appreciate it if you guys just all piss off, because it's not me. It is literally software. And there's nothing hiring an audio guy is going to do to fix that. All right. I've been playing this game for like multiple years now, and sometimes there's just glitches in the system that I'm always trying to get fixed. So I apologize for that, doing my absolute best to get it up and running. But at the end of the day, this is just kind of like where I sit at, and I'm doing my absolute best to make sure that I can bring this stream to you guys. There's nothing I can do when it goes down to when I click go live and it just gives me problems. So I'm doing my absolute best to keep this running for you. So if you could keep that shit to yourself as far as I'm fucking concerned, or you can go somewhere else. All right. Right here, what we have is we have the George H.W. Bush that is all the way down over here in the south. And we have the Abraham Lincoln that's currently sitting off the coast of Oman. And then we have the Ford Carrier Strike Group that's up over in the northern portion of the Red Sea. Now, the Ford was actually outside of Israel, and since the ceasefire, it's moved into the northern portion of the Red Sea. Why do I think this is actually significant, and why do you guys need to be paying attention to this? Well, it has to do with the new threat, number one, from the IRGC talking about shutting down the Red Sea, and number two, we actually have to deal with now the Houthis over inside of the Red Sea. So we've got the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea to worry about. Houthis have said that if, the United States ends up attacking, that they are going to jump in and they're going to shut down the Red Sea. And last week, there was actually a couple of attacks that ended up getting reported on some merchant vessels down here. Nothing significant, nothing crazy, but still some attacks came in anyways. So because of that, what it looks like is the CENTCOM had repositioned the Ford Strike Carrier Group. Now, when we look at the actual distance, if I bring this up over and put it on, give me a second here to pull up Google Earth, and grab that, get that out, and get you guys up so that we can get our war actually on over here. When we end up taking a look at this and where everything's at, if you assume the Ford's about right here, and you look at where we've been striking, you are looking at, let's switch this over to miles so most of you guys feel a little better. You're looking at about roughly 1,000 miles from where the Ford's at to where we have historically been striking over inside of Isfahan like area location, right? Like that's where we're worried about to go over and get everything and pull it all out of there. But with that being said, you take a look at where the Lincoln is reported to be at, and you're looking at roughly about the same distance when we click on it. It's about 1,000 miles, which I think is pretty dang interesting when you take a look at that. And so realistically, with the Ford, where it was positioned outside of Israel, it was somewhere, I will call it outside of Haifa. If we were to measure that out from where it used to be, I believe it was outside the port of Haifa, and you go bring it over and you click it on there it was about, 900 miles. So in reality, when we talk about like strike distance, let me do that again. In reality, when we start talking about strike distance, yeah, pretty much 1,000 miles. What you can actually see is you can see the U.S. government kind of like repositioning its assets within the region in order to kind of like help out. Interesting part about it as well. Let me see, because I want to measure this out. If you take a look at where it would have been at down over to the Strait of Hormuz, that puts you at about 1,300 miles to get it down to the Strait of Hormuz. Simply repositioning it over here to the north actually cuts off a lot of that. And there we're over at, 1,200-ish miles. So it's a little bit closer. But in reality, what it does is it allows that strike carrier group to be much closer to Sana'a, puts it about 1,000 miles away from Sana'a. Which is the Houthi capital, where they've been kind of bombing the crap out of everybody. So in reality, what we did was we repositioned, all right, one warship. If we were to go back to that slide and take a look at it, there we go. If we look at these ships and like kind of how we reposition them, putting the Ford up over here puts it within 1,000 miles of Sana'a, the capital for the Houthis. So if they go to shut down the Red Sea, it also puts it within about 1,000 miles of Isfahan for where those strikes are at. So it can be dual purpose, but I got a feeling they're going to be a little bit busy down here. And that also leaves the Abraham Lincoln with its ability to strike. So that leaves the George W. Bush that is on its way to get up over in the AO by the Lincoln. So how long is it going to take? Well, at 20 knots, at about 20 knots, it's going to take the George Bush 5 days to get up there. So you're looking at Sunday going into Monday, if this is reporting is true. Now, this was its position on the 20th or 21st, if I remember right, when I went over and checked the fleet tracker. So it could actually be closer. George Bush could get there by Saturday, and we could see bombs falling on Saturday. Depends on how fast it's going and where exactly it's at in the region in order to make that happen. Fox McCloud says, any word on our famous European allies sending any kind of help? No. As a matter of fact, the European allies want absolutely nothing to do with it. Durr says, thank you for all that you do. Your best is good enough. Well, right now you're getting a stream this morning because that is just how I've got the sucker set up, and it's going to go the way it's going to go. Ghost Hybrid says, it's okay, Matt. A lot of streamers have had a hard time keeping it up and running. Yeah, I mean, it's just the way it goes. It's tech. Stephen Adams says, happy birthday, Matt. Peace and love. Boo, T Grease. Shut up and take the $2 anyway. Oh, you make me laugh, buddy. You freaking make me laugh. Axios is reporting that it's going to be about 3 to 5 days before we end up opening up again. President Trump is giving Iran's wearing factions a short window to unify behind a coherent counteroffer or ceasefire he extended Tuesday. Ends, 3 U.S. officials tell Axios. Trump is willing to give another 3 to 5 days of ceasefire to allow the Iranians to get their crap together. One U.S. source briefed on the matter said. That comes straight from Axios. So that report from Axios, if that's what Trump is saying, he's given them 3 to 5 days. When we actually take a look at where everything's at, that makes sense as to why he's doing it. I think what we actually saw last night from Trump in his statement was really an excuse to get the George W. Bush up over into the theater of operations. So likely what we're going to end up seeing here is bombs falling sometime this weekend. 3 to 5 days is a decent window to get the George Bush up there. The Ford and the Lincoln are obviously already in position. So when we look at this, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at the George Bush taking about 3 to 5 days to travel up over into the Lincoln's area of responsibility, which is obviously going to be Iran. And once it gets there, then it's free game. And then we're going to start seeing, freaking stuff flying again. So I have no doubt they're going to be going over and freaking getting on them now. Let's keep this sucker rolling. And get into some of the stuff. Now, with the announcement of the ceasefire, put this up on the screen for you guys. With the announcement of the ceasefire, Iran decided it would be pretty cool to roll their ballistic missiles into the middle of Tehran last night to kind of rally their supporters. So while the United States was screaming that, Iran's just doesn't have it together and we're trying to find people to negotiate with, what we're actually seeing inside of Iran is completely and totally different. What we're seeing inside of Iran is them absolutely wanting war. As I said, they took over those ships this morning, and I think we're going to continue to see that. Here, for example, quite obvious, them parading these ballistic missiles around. And there's plenty of videos that show them celebrating last night over there. And I think that is just one of those things we're going to continue to see. Give me one sec here, because like I said, I'm doing this a little bit different. So you guys gotta give me a sec. Might be this one. No. Oh, come on. Where is it? No. Get in order. It's making me find the appropriate video so I can play it for you. Man, I missed my old freaking setup. There we go. That's the one right there. That's the one right there. All right, we're going to go ahead and get this video up on the screen and let you guys hear what Fox News is actually saying about all of this.
Cargo ships have been hit by Iranian gunfires in those small little fast boats in the Strait of Hormuz, and it happened this morning.
Meanwhile, President Trump has extended his ceasefire deadline, citing a fractured regime. And Matt Finn is live in Islamabad, Pakistan, with the latest for us. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Ainsley. There is supposed to be a ceasefire, but we are getting these reports of 3 separate ships attacked in the Strait of Hormuz this morning. The third cargo ship, the most recent, reportedly has been attacked while attempting to transit the strait. It may have a Panama flag on it. And earlier, the British military reported one of its ships was attacked as well. We don't have the confirmed attacker, but, Iran is suspected here.
3 cargo ships have been reported.
Oh, we don't have a confirmed attacker, you say. My butt, we don't have a confirmed attacker. We know exactly who it's been. It's been Iran. The container ship Euphoria has been seized by Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, along with 2 other container ships, the Epaminondas and the MSC Francesca. Those were actually taken by the Iranians. The Euphoria was allegedly seized as well. So 3 of those are being reported as being seized. and that is by tanker trackers. They normally have some pretty good intel that comes out on those. In addition to that, the IRGC did put out this message saying two offending ships, the Francesca and the Epaminondas, good luck pronouncing that crap, have jeopardized maritime security with the necessary permits by tampering with navigation systems, and they were seized by the IRGC and directed to the Iranian coast. So they flat out seized these ships today. When Trump announced yesterday that we ended up having man, my brain's not working today. When Trump ended up announcing last night that we had extended the ceasefire agreement, Iran said that they don't agree. And they started making those AI videos and just talking trash on Trump, like mad talking trash on Trump. And so now, more or less what we're seeing is we're seeing Iran saying, nope, the strait is now closed to everybody. And you don't have to agree with them, but that's, just essentially what they're saying. The other thing that they're actually doing is they're threatening the Strait of Hormuz in general. They're actually going after the underground sea cables, and there's a ton of them. And to kind of remind you guys, I can probably find, let me see here, underground sea cables. There's tons of maps of these dang things to kind of like bring this up. Let's see here. Yeah, let's just go ahead and get this up on the screen for you guys so you can take a look and see exactly where these things lead. Let's see here, Africa. Oh my goodness, why are you acting this way? I hate this website. These sea cables that end up like transferring everywhere. I don't know why it's so freaking annoying. I don't like this website. There's a better one. Here we go. This one will probably be better. I like this one better. Oh, it's not even going to show. Okay, screw it. I'll go over to Google Earth. All right, so here's the deal. These sea cables that end up controlling everything, they're the fiber optic cables, and the strait within itself, like I said, there's about 2 miles wide as far as lanes go that these guys can actually like transit through as far as the international shipping lanes. And those sea cables are going to be routed within there as well. Now, if Iran goes and severs off those sea cables, they pretty much cut all of the fiber off for the entire Gulf region, which would be a bit of a problem when we start talking about banking and everything else that's going on. When you start talking about the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, and portions of Iran. I'm sure, though, Iran's got other ways coming out here through, these different cables that be running up north. But they go and they cut those off. And it is a significant threat that they're actually bringing this up and threatening it. Back in, was it 2023, I believe, after the war over inside of Gaza kicked off and the Houthis decided to enter it, they did sever a couple of the cables going through the Red Sea over here in this tiny little strait. When they cut that off, it did cause some temporary problems, but what all they had to do is kind of like reroute everything. These cables are not like tiny, they're huge, they're thick. And I don't think Iran really possesses the ability to dive down there right now and actually place charges and thoroughly sever every single one of these dang things. Their Navy's been taken out, their subs, like everything they have has been taken out. So I'd be very curious to see how Iran goes about doing this. Now, the way Russia has done this in the past with their shadow fleet, and several different ways, is taking massive anchors and dragging them across the bottom of the ocean and severing the cables that way. And so there is a good possibility that Iran tries to do something like that. But if they do, highly likely that the U.S. is going to end up interdicting them, and it's not going to go anywhere. So I am not honestly too worried about that at all, like at all. So yeah, don't. I'm not necessarily counting on it. James Power says, I do have to say that the Iranian AI videos are hilarious and a little correct with all of the wish-wash and the flip-flopping the U.S. admins are doing. They are doing a lot of flip-flopping, man. I don't personally care for them. I think it's pretty... I did not have on my bingo card for this year Iran would be, just flicking crap on social media at the Trump administration as they're getting like bombed to oblivion. But I mean, it is what it is. It's propaganda. For all the crap that the IDF gets, they're actually putting warm bodies on the line while our allies do nothing. I'm starting to agree with Trump. Yeah, that's the other thing. They're 100% putting their warm bodies on the line. What is real says Gittin 57a in the Babylonian Talmud depicts Yeshua, meaning Jesus, as a false prophet burning in hell feces. Israel's foundation is in the Talmud. Let's see here. What else you got? As much as you know about Islam, check the Talmud. Well, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. Can you tell me the last time the Jews threatened to nuke the United States of America? I mean, just before I even bother getting into like the religious context of anything, can you tell me the last time the Jews threatened to nuke the United States of America? Can you tell me what terror proxy organization they run? Can you tell me any of that? Any at all? Like, honestly, can you? And then let's talk about the difference between the Talmud and the Torah. There's a big difference between those two. Are you aware of the difference between the Talmud versus the Torah? The Talmud is essentially a bunch of old rabbis arguing back and forth over what the Torah and the scripture actually means. It's not actually held as a real belief. And so you can actually find different things within the Talmud of a bunch of people arguing about tons of crap. Doesn't mean that's what the Jewish faith is. I don't know if you realize that. What you should actually check is you should check a lot of the different hadiths, specifically how Muhammad got so strong by sleeping with 30 men from the Al-Zut tribe. That's what you should probably check. I would suggest that one, along with killing every Jew hiding behind a rock and tree. Nicola says, anytime Trump looks into the media, we attack. I bet we see a large attack from USA this weekend. Appear weak when you are strong. I mean, it is possible. It is possible that we end up doing that. Like I said, 2 to 3 days, man. I mean, 3 to 5 days for it to get there. It was off the coast of Madagascar. I'm assuming it's north of it. If I go over to US Fleet Tracker, it'd give us a little bit better of an idea for actually where it's at. Like specifically, because I want to say it was the 20th that I looked at that. The last update they gave. Yeah, so the last update they gave right there, it was on April 20th. And so you're talking about, a day and a half, 2 days ago for where that ship was located. Just FYI. So a day and a half to 2 days ago. And like I said, if it's cooking at full freaking strength, take about 3.5 days. So we're already a day and a half beyond that. It could be there on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Who really knows? I know the United States Navy isn't giving the most up-to-date locations on where it's at. But the interesting part about it to me anyways is, the report from Axios that says they have a source that says Trump's willing to give another 3 to 5 days, because that lines up directly with how long it's going to take the Ford to actually get into position. Was it the Ford? I believe it was the Ford to get into position. Or I'm sorry, the Bush. Take the Bush to actually get in position. That tracks. That lines up. And so in the meantime, what we're going to expect to see probably is just Iran doing a lot more freaking trash like that, going up and taking out more ships, making more threats, everything else. This is specifically what ended up getting put out by Tasnim News, which is, the Iran state affiliated, channel. Strait of Hormuz is not just a vital route for transiting oil and gas. It's a narrow waterway. It's also one of the most important internet bottlenecks regions of the world. According to submarine network data, at least 7 major communication cables in the Persian Gulf countries pass through the route. More than 97% of the world's internet traffic is transported via these sea and fiber optic cables. It's not. Cables such as Falcon A1, blah, 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 blah. Significant part of the region. Yeah, whatever. Long story short, they'll screw over the Gulf states if they cut these off. That's really what it's about. And you're talking about bank transactions and all sorts of things that would screw with the world economy. But as far as cutting off the internet for you and me, no, it's not going to happen. Not how it works. And if I actually had the map up and running and working, it would be a hell of a lot more clear for where it's going to be going. Other interesting thing that ended up coming out was this, the Treasury Secretary. Now, people have been talking about this, but it hasn't really been official until now, essentially. He announced the other day, what was it? Operation something Fury. I forget what the hell he calls it. Economic Fury, Operation Economic Fury, where he's waging economic warfare against, Iran. But what's interesting is they're actually going after Iranian oil with, obviously the ports being closed off. And what the goal is for them by stopping Iran's ability to export oil. What they're doing is they're causing all of their, storage tanks to fill up. And once those storage tanks are full, then Iran's going to have to shut off all of their pumps and everything else. And it's going to have this huge ripple effect working back in Iran. And so that's pretty much what he's laying out. The United States Navy will continue the blockade of Iranian ports. In a matter of days, cargo island storage will be full and the fragile Iranian oil wells will be shut in. Constraining Iran's maritime trade directly targets the regime's primary revenue lifelines. U.S. Treasury will continue to apply maximum pressure through economic fury to systematically degrade Tehran's ability to generate, move, and repatriate funds. Any person or vessel facilitating these flows through covert trade and finance risks exposure to U.S. sanctions, and we will continue to freeze the funds solely by the corrupt leadership on behalf of the people of Iran. That's great for money today, but really what it does is every day that goes by that this is stocked up is going to start backing up Iran. It's going to cause them to shut off pipelines. It's going to cause them to shut down the pumps. It's going to cause them to do all sorts of stuff. And once these wells get shut off, cranking them back up is a little bit bigger of a problem than most people realize. Now, Iran's GDP is about, I think it's 350 billion, sits something around 350 billion. That's it. Versus the United States military, which is upwards of 900 billion. All right. So the United States military's budget, 900 billion. Iran's GDP, 350 billion. Shutting this off and doing this to Iran is a very, very big deal. And no, we are not seeing a lot of help come in from U.S. allies on any of this. It's just turning into a big pain in the butt. Now, crude oil is one of those things that we've got to keep a watch on. And I'm throwing this out there for you guys as you continue to watch this. This is current freaking crude oil prices as far as CME Group goes. Last traded at 92.48 a barrel. In my opinion, what's happening right now is we have Trump that's manipulating the markets. I believe I talked about this slightly yesterday. One of the main issues that we're going to have when it goes down to the crude oil and the price of oil is going to be what it's going to look like in the future. So right now, the prices look stable. And as I told you guys in the past, these things take a while to actually like catch up in time, if that makes sense. And so the system within itself, you're talking about crude oil being shipped out from the Middle East, 20% of the world's crude oil being shipped out from the Middle East. The reality is that crude oil has to get somewhere, it has to get refined, then it has to get sold, and it has to get shipped to that location. That bubble in the system is expected to hit somewhere around June to July timeframe. And that's right around key travel time for pretty much the entire freaking world during the summertime. So when that happens, and we have that, what you can actually expect is I don't think $200 a barrel is realistic, but just because of that bubble, let's say the war ends today, just because of that bubble, it is possible that you guys see, from what I've read, $130 to $150 spikes. So don't so much pay attention to the price per barrel right now. It's going to be in the future that you guys really need to watch out for as it goes down to all these oil prices. Iran's well aware of that. United States doesn't really care. We're complaining. We're saying that we're not complaining. We're bragging, saying that, well, everybody's coming over to the United States and filling up on oil, which is great for the U.S. economy to an extent, because not only are we the world's largest producer of crude oil, pulling it out of the ground, but we're also the world's largest consumer. So if we start exporting even more, and right now we have a surplus, we export more than we use, which is good. We're one of the few countries that actually does that. But if we start exporting even more, it's still going to cause those prices here in the United States of America to go up, in my opinion, just kind of like along that route. So it could cause a freaking shortage here in the United States of America. What I'm reading right now is that we're actually going to be seeing increase in ticket costs through airlines. So if you guys have like travel plans and stuff like that for the summer, suggest you get your tickets now. Don't hold off. If you can afford it, get them, because it's just going to continue to go up. Trump declaring that Iran is collapsing financially, which is fine. They want the Strait of Hormuz open immediately, starving for cash, losing $500 million a day. Military and police complaining that they are not getting paid. That's actually true about the military and police complaining that they're not getting paid. They were actually worried about that when financial fury kicked off with the UAE's sanctions, digging into their freaking banks and pulling all of that out. But as far as the Strait of Hormuz being open immediately, that's not true. I mean, it might be in the back of their minds that they want the strait open, but Iran's been declaring for the last 72 hours that the strait is in fact closed. They've been screaming that the U.S. is in direct violation of the ceasefire agreement. They are refusing to show up to peace talks. All of those things are happening. And the amount of time that Trump is giving them, supposedly, according to Axios, the 3 to 5 days is the same amount of time it's going to take for our ships to get there and start bombing the crap out of them. Jason says, a bit off topic, but do you think we should leave NATO? Do I think we should leave NATO? No. I think it would be dumb for the United States to leave NATO, to be honest, when we start looking at a lot of the different things that are happening. I think if the U.S. does pull out of NATO, it most certainly gives Putin like a little bit more grounds to start invading and moving on some of these other countries up over there. I talked about, I believe it was Estonia that we were worried about the other day. And what I don't want to see is I don't want to see Putin invading another NATO country. If that happens, yes, World War III is on the table. And I said a long time ago that because of the way everything is, because of how all of this is and how this affects Russia and China, that I expect Russia to start doing some crazy stuff here in their near future. And I think we're going to be seeing that very, very soon. Iran is the pivotal point in all of this, the absolute pivotal point in all of this. And taking them out is going to hurt Russia badly. It's already hurting China, right? It hasn't so much affected Russia as much as far as the Shahed drone tech, all of that stuff. They've got all of that. As far as like the money laundering goes, the oil, blah, 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 blah. That's going to have a rippling effect. That's going to take a while. But what's actually hurting them is China, the impact it's having on China. By the lack of oil, China buys about 90% of Iran's oil, if I remember correctly. They get about 40% of their oil from the Strait of Hormuz, and they are down about 10% as far as oil goes, and they've been sourcing most of it from Brazil to make up for everything that ended up coming out of Iran. Now, Iran, because it's got sanctioned oil, China can get it for pretty cheap. When you start talking about sourcing it from other countries like India, like Brazil, that cost is going to go through the roof. India gets a lot of its oil from Russia. They've been buying all of the sanctioned Russian oil. And then they take that and they refine it. They've been selling it to EU and several other places. But China is now like picking up on that. So the oil costs for them are going up. Now, China actually ends up importing and burning more than they export. All right. So they are net negative when it goes down to oil. Over 70% of China's teapot refineries have been shut down. It is drastically hurting their economy. And it's drastically, because of that, drastically hurting the Russian war machine. Right? If you guys haven't heard me complain about this before or talk about this before, this is the problem. Right? It's drastically going to be affecting that Russian war machine. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where Russia is going to start getting crazy. The longer this goes on, we can see Russia getting more and more emboldened by all of this. I also want to point out Yemen down there underneath Iran. And I told you guys, Hezbollah, Venezuela, and Yemen, right? And what do we see right now? Well, we see the IDF moving on Hezbollah. We see Venezuela has already been taken care of. And Yemen right now, we've got that strike carrier group back over inside of the Red Sea in preparation to strike Sana'a and start going after the Houthis because they're starting to come out again. Now, all of those, Venezuela, Hezbollah, Yemen, all of those are being controlled by Iran, or were anyways, because Maduro ends up getting ripped out, along with China controlling Venezuela as well. But with that being said, we've got two of the next pieces, in line that are fixing to fall. And it's important to actually bring this up because I believe it was last night. No, it wasn't last night's stream. It was a different night stream. I was talking about this. United States is actually going to be holding talks over inside of, here in America, but we're holding them we are holding these for Lebanon and for Israel because of the ceasefire. And that's supposed to be taking place here in the United States, which is odd. We're going to be, doing that here inside of the United States. If that's true, right? Lebanon cannot defeat Hezbollah on its own. Lebanon's only got about 80,000 or so within their active duty military. Their Air Force sucks. And they would likely, even if they agree to go and take out Hezbollah, they are going to need help from Israel to do it. It would have to be a joint operation. This is something I've been saying for a while. So do I think that's going to happen? Yes, I do. It is going to happen, as a matter of fact. And here is Israel's foreign minister actually bringing that very topic up.
Made a historic decision to negotiate directly with Lebanon after more than 40 years. Unfortunately, Lebanon is a failed state, a state that is de facto under Iranian occupation through Hezbollah. But this also leads to a conclusion. Hezbollah is common enemy of Israel and Lebanon. Just as it threatens Israel's security, it harms Lebanon's sovereignty and threatens its future. We don't have any serious disagreements with Lebanon. There are a few minor border disputes that can be solved. The obstacle to peace and normalization between the countries is one: Hezbollah. Tomorrow, the direct talks between Israel and Lebanon will resume in Washington, D.C. I call on the government of Lebanon, let's work together against the terror state that Hezbollah built in your territory. This cooperation is needed by you even more than by us. It requires more clarity and the courage to take risks. But there is no real alternative for ensuring a future of peace for you and for us. And for you, for Lebanon, a future of sovereignty, independence, and freedom from the Iranian occupation. The people of Israel want and have always wanted peace, a real peace, a peace that is not based on illusions and on the abandonment of our future and security, a peace rooted in security. It requires patience and wisdom. It requires the abilities to confront the enemies of peace, to prevent them from establishing their strength, because they will always use it in the next phase.
So what does that mean? Well, quite frankly, it means that they are going to need the help of if Lebanon, if the ceasefire is going to be successful over inside of Lebanon, it's not really going to be a ceasefire. It's a pause. And the Lebanese military, and hear me out, there's some historical precedents for what I'm saying. The Lebanese military wasn't capable of, kicking Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon. They were owning and standing on top of their ships. They were doing everything. There's nothing that they could do to get Hezbollah out of southern Lebanon, even with UNIFIL there. And by the way, they killed a UN worker last week after the ceasefire was announced. Hezbollah did. So if there is going to be success inside of Lebanon, it is going to be a joint effort between Israel and the Lebanese military, because the Lebanese military is not strong enough to defeat Hezbollah with Israelis' help and Israelis' air power, because Israelis' air force 10 times stronger. Like it's a joke when I look at the Lebanese one, 10 times stronger. Last week, Iran came out and stated that Hezbollah and the IRGC were one, which is why they were calling for the ceasefire on both. So I want you to look at this way. If Trump came out and he said, all right, we've made a deal with the Iranians and we are going to be able to get their enriched uranium. That is one of the main talking points, not even all of them, that we had concerns with that came down to the war over inside of Iran. We were also concerned with their ballistic missile program. We were also concerned with their foreign terror organizations. And Iran was supposed to stop funding them. That was one of our other demands. Well, Iran's came out and stated the opposite. Iran's came out and stated that they and Hezbollah are one, meaning they're not going to back down. And so even if for some reason, Iran opens up the Strait of Hormuz, they agree to give up the enriched uranium, they do all of those things, the odds of the war stopping are pretty much zero at this point, because Israel is going to ensure the destruction of Hezbollah. They're either going to do that with the help of the Lebanese government or without it. And that is what the United States is trying to work towards and help. At the same time, IRGC is kind of screwing themselves, greatly screwing themselves with the Gulf nations. You have the Gulf nations right now that are talking about setting up an entire freaking security force just to lock down the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Iran's been claiming for a very long time, very, very long time, that the only thing they've been striking in the region is U.S. targets and Israeli targets. They have tried to claim that they are not the ones that were behind the attacks on all of the different infrastructure in all of the Gulf nations. And then this came out, and I believe this was actually a flyer saying that the target is Qatar, if I remember right. and it's attached to one of the Iranian ballistic missiles. And the IRGC ended up publishing this yesterday, I believe it was, of one of their ballistic missiles. So that is just a statement, if you will, that they're sending out to the different Gulf nations, that they are in fact going over and attacking them. So it's not something that I think we should be taking lightly at all. The bottom line is, regardless of Trump saying that we are that close to a ceasefire agreement or that any of that's going to go down, the writing on the wall is that it's going to happen, and it's probably going to go down in a drastic way this weekend, because Trump's running out of time as far as like the War Powers Act is concerned. He needs to get that ship up over there, and he needs to start bombing if he actually wants any of this to like come through. At the same time, we're seeing other signs of some stuff going on over in the Middle East. And I do believe that option that I've been talking to you guys about, the Kurds, is actually going to be taking place. And I say that for a reason, because over inside of the South right now, up over in Sulaymaniyah in Iraq, we are actually seeing signs that the IRGC is preparing for it. I'm going to talk to you guys about that coming up next. Fox McCloud says, what about ramping up production in Venezuela? Don't think it would do any good, because, I mean, you're still going to be shipping it back to the United States. We're going to have to refine it. I just don't see it actually making a big difference. It takes a while to do that stuff. What is real says, what is the Samson option? Define terrorism. Terrorism would be any army engaging in conflict. Ooh, the Samson option. I haven't heard that one in a while. Let's go take a look at that one. It's so bad. I already forgot what the Samson option is. Refers to Israel's alleged strategic doctrine of using nuclear weapons as a last resort. That's right. What's wrong with that? I'm just curious. Define terrorism would be any army engaged in conflict. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. You can use that all of you want, but we do have a definition of terrorism, which is using the threat of violence or using violence itself to push a political or ideological agenda. And when we look at what Iran's doing, they are using proxy organizations to hold the world hostage via the Strait of Hormuz and via the Red Sea and via everything that's taking place over inside Lebanon and a lot of different places around the world. And that threat of violence, of shutting down and holding the world's economy hostage so that they can do whatever they want, would be terrorism. And they fit that definition. So what is real? Well, you might not like that. That is, quite frankly, what it is. So they're restricting other people's rights specifically to do that. And there's a religious aspect to it as well. So you can hate that all you want. You can hate the fact that that is the definition, and Iran and its proxy organizations fit that definition. But what you don't get to do is try to throw around some philosophical phrase and pretend like it applies to every military on the planet. I'm sorry. Stop listening to frickin' Tucker Carlson and what's his damn name? Nick Fuentes. Maybe your brain will work a little bit better. But we have legal definitions in this country of terrorism. And Iran, the IRGC, fits one in particular, which is why they're a designated foreign terror organization. Same thing with all their proxies. You might not like that, but that's just it. And if you don't like it, maybe, I don't know, pick up and move somewhere else. Just throwing that out there. You could always do that. Fox McCloud says East Europe likes us. Western Europe is the problem. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty much all of Europe at this point, to be quite frank. Yeah, I'm just going to go with all of Europe doesn't like us. Seabass says Trump always chickens out, so focused on making a deal that he let people walk on him, like lifting sanctions on Russia, just to put them back and lift them up again looks weak. Well, Seabass, that's not necessarily true. You're talking about market manipulation. And I like you, Seabass. You're talking about market manipulation. When he did that, it was Russian ships that were actually already in the water, and he lifted it. And believe it or not, that has far less of an impact than all of the Russian oil that the EU continues to buy via India. Russia takes its oil now, sells it to India. India refines it and then ships it over to the EU, where they buy it hand over fist. As a matter of fact, ever since the sanctions took place by the EU after 2022, when they said that they weren't going to be buying any more Russian oil, that they were going to wean off of it, they have been buying more and more and more of it every single year from India. I actually laid those numbers out. Trump letting off that little bit of oil, he was attempting to stabilize the oil markets. That was it. And that is a fraction of the impact. And I mean a fraction of the impact of the EU buying Russian oil through India, which I'll remind you is a BRICS nation. Just throwing that one out there as well. So if you want to complain about sanctions and you want to complain about people helping out Russia, complain about the EU, because they have been causing huge amounts of damage to Ukraine just from buying the Russian oil. 1/3 of Russia's GDP comes from their sale of oils. So you can complain about Trump lifting sanctions because you read it in an X post somewhere, or because Tucker Carlson told you, or Candace, or I don't freaking know who it is you listen to where you get this information. But do me a favor, man, dig just a little bit deeper next time you get given something like that, because it's not true at all. And as a matter of fact, when we actually start talking about what's actually helping and impacting the war over there, this is actually what's impacting and helping the war over there. Russia losing its ability to get and sell oil, all right, to Venezuela. Russia losing its ability to launder money via Venezuela. Russia losing its key ally, Iran. Pretty freaking huge. Russia having to pay for every single chunk of metal now, even more so, that comes out of China. That's huge. You want to talk about a real impact on Russia and the Russian war machine? That's it right there. And claiming that he's chickening out, I think is kind of funny, because I just quite literally laid out for you. Literally laid out for you. Let me get it back up. Literally laid out for you the reason for this current delay, which is going to be the George Bush all the way down here. That's going to take 3 to 5 days to get its butt up here. And that information's already, a day and a half stale, if not 2 days stale. So they might be there by Friday, believe it or not. And they're going to start bombing again. So you call it chickening out, when in reality, it's strategic placement of key national assets. The Ford Strike Carrier Group, or Carrier Strike Group, being placed in the Red Sea to combat the Houthis over in Yemen, while maintaining position and striking distance over on Iran. And then moving the George Bush up there to back it up, because the Ford may very well have to shift and start bombing Yemen or Sana'a down inside Yemen. And that's actually what we're seeing right now. So as we like to sit around and we like to say that Trump always chickens out and everything else, the fact is that he's actually done more damage to Iran and their proxy organizations than any other freaking president in the last 20 plus years. So, I mean, if you're gonna make statements, I mean, I appreciate you sending me the money. You know what I mean? Like, I'll take your money, man, but bring facts along with it. Unless you just want to give me money and have me counter every single narrative you have, I'll do it every single time. But you're way off when you bring that up, man. If you want to get upset about anybody supporting Russia, get upset at the EU. Get upset about the amount of oil that they're buying. Tor 30 Alpha says, do you see Thailand cost 60 million liters of fuel? Lost 60 million liters of fuel. Smells like China. Keep up the great work. Everyone share this everywhere. Nanner gang. No, I didn't see anything about Thailand losing the fuel. What I have seen over the last several days is lots of different like oil rigs and things like that have been getting set on fire randomly around the world. And people are saying that it is possible that it's, what do you want to say it? It is possible that it's sabotage operations and things like that are taking place. Anyways, I digress. I do want to get back into some of the things I was talking about with you. And we're going to go back over the map, and we're going to go into Iraq, and we're going to go up over here into northern Iraq, into the Solmania area. This is where the Kurds are hanging out at, as you guys see it. And this is also, by the way, I want to point it out, Sanandaj. I've talked about how important that location is for quite some time. The United States and Israel have been bombing IRGC and besieged locations in Sanandaj pretty hard. And we've also bombed like key border crossings up over in this area in several other locations. Solmania has a lot of Kurds inside of it. And that is also the reported area where a lot of the Kurds were, how do I want to say it? A lot of the Kurds were getting armed up and trained and sending it in. And overnight, it would appear as if Iranian proxy forces, the PMF, have started launching brand new attacks against the Kurds up over in Solmania. Lots of them have been taking place up over there. So why would Iran be doing all of this? Well, in my opinion, Iran's doing all of this because they want to degrade. They want to degrade the Kurds to try to prevent them from going into northern Iran. We've got what did I say? 3 to 5 days left before the Ford gets back over, or before the Bush gets over into position. 3 to 5 days left. And Trump has limited amounts of time. It is extremely possible that Trump ends up cutting these proxy organizations loose to actually go into, northern Iran and start causing problems. I don't think my assessment of this has really changed about what the United States is going to be doing, because them going over and making those attacks, and we've seen a lot of problems. And by the way, I complained, I think it was Monday, saying that the United States of America needs to cut off all of the funding to Iraq. And it looks like all of our military funding and stuff has been cut off to them because the PMF is continuing their attacks up here in the north against the Kurds. And they have been refusing to, basically the Iraqis have continued to refuse to dismantle the PMF. And so we said in December that we're going to cut your funding in half. If you guys don't do something about it, we cut their funding in half, and then they continued forward, and they are still, working and not doing a damn thing about the PMF. The PMF right now is going after what appears to be, the U.S. proxy force. This next week, if the Kurds, if things go off, you might actually see the Kurds make an incursion over into Iran and start drawing out some of the IRGC forces. Because like I said, we have had a lot of heavy bombings over here. While we've, talked about, the focus on Tehran and a bunch of the strikes down in Isfahan before everything ended, a couple of weeks ago, the reality is that a third of our airstrikes have actually been directed over here as well, up over in this region. And it's not like they have their ballistic missile factories and all that crap over there. No, we're going specifically after the Besiege and IRGC forces that are staged in that area. So we're taking them out. One of the first cities we actually saw split and move away from the regime, and this was prior to U.S. intervention over inside of Iran, was over here. And this, again, is another Kurdish region, and it is just due east of Baghdad, right up over here on the border, over in the Ilium area. I probably screwed up the pronunciation of all of this crap. So, the Kurds ended up separating and breaking their ways free down up over here. And some of the paramilitary forces on the Iranian side actually came out and ended up joining in with them. What is real says, so what would Trump doing be under the definition of terrorism? I listened to everyone. I was in the military for 10 years and I am no leftist, but having a different opinion, it doesn't make me less American. Well, when you start describing the United States as a terrorist organization, it does actually. And being in the military for 10 years is great. And I've said this before, but just because you served any amount of time within the United States military doesn't give you carte blanche to, come out and just spew nonsense. So that's my opinion on that. Right. And I'm not saying that you're a leftist, but Candace doesn't claim to be a leftist either. Neither does Nick Fuentes. They both claim to be, recapturing the right. And that MAGA is dead and all of this other crap. When in reality, what they're doing is they're spitting Kremlin propaganda. You can literally look at some of their stuff and see how it goes like side and side with it. Watching comparisons, I forget that lady from the Young Turks, her narratives along with Nick Fuentes is exactly the same. And so and by the way, some of the stuff that you were saying is echoed by those folks right there. And they're very good at spinning stuff. And the hard part is actually doing the work and figuring out the nuances of what's actually happening on the ground, right? Which is what this community is all about. So what would Trump's doing be under the definition of terrorism? Self-defense. It's not under the definition of terrorism. See, the problem is your framing of the question. You're framing the question wrong. What Trump is actually doing is self-defense. We have U.S. troops in this region. Whether you agree with it or not, it's legal. It's legal. They're not inside of Iran, or at least they weren't until we started bombing the crap out of them. And Iran, whether they like it or not, is in Iraq. When U.S. entered Iraq, it had nothing to do with Iran. Iran made it everything to do with them. And if you got a problem with U.S. troops being in Iraq, then you certainly have a problem with Hezbollah in the IRGC being inside of Lebanon. And you certainly have a problem with the IRGC and the Houthis down in Yemen. And you most certainly have a problem with the IRGC holding the Strait of Hormuz hostage. And you most certainly have a problem with the IRGC, got to flip it around, that was down here in Venezuela. along with Russia, along with China, and everybody else. And so we've got to be intellectually honest when we take a look at this. Iran has 4,000 kilometer range ballistic missiles. It is a fact. We have came out with it now. It's just known at this point now, because Iran decided to shoot them. And I can pull up other videos of the Iranians claiming that they have these freaking ballistic missiles, and if they need to use them again, they will. If I need to pull those videos up, I can. That 4,000 kilometer range ballistic missile from Venezuela would cover the entire eastern seaboard of the United States of America, period. There's no other way to look at that. It would cover the eastern seaboard of the United States, every single southern state, and about 75% of Texas. And Venezuela and the IRGC were selling arms to each other. And the IRGC has been screaming death to America for how long now? Additionally, we can talk about U.S. troops being killed in the region. Now, whether you like it or not, the United States had a base outside of Al-Tanf in the tri-border region over here. All right. And at this base, back in January of 2023, three U.S. service members were killed by Kataib Hezbollah, which is an IRGC proxy terror organization that answers directly to the Quds Force. Killed them, dead. We can also talk about the amount of U.S. service members that have been killed over inside of Iraq as a result of the IRGC during the war. We can talk about them screaming death to America the entire time. And most certainly what we can do is we can say, we do not have to wait for somebody to shoot us before we kill them first. And if you think that way, you're an imbecile. We absolutely don't have to wait for that. With just ballistic missiles, Iran held and has been holding the Strait of Hormuz hostage, and they've been allowed to move these terror organizations into Yemen, into Lebanon, into the West Bank, into Syria, into Iraq, and nobody in the Gulf states do anything about it because they're afraid of the oil getting shut off. If Iran had a nuke, which they want to be a nuclear threshold nation, which isn't even true. There's actually a video of one of the IRGC or parliament speakers coming out saying, no. We were trying to develop a bomb, but the U.S. caught on to it. Like you realize that there's a video of them admitting to wanting to build a nuclear weapon, right? Like that exists as well. If they had a nuke, not only would they control these two key waterways, the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea, not only would they control that, they would start moving to hold a lot of other nations hostage. And that's something that the United States, quite frankly, can't afford. And neither can the rest of the world. So it's silly to sit back and try to say that Trump is doing this as an act of terrorism, when the reality is that Iran has been holding the world hostage with their ballistic missiles and their terror organizations because people have been afraid to shut the whole place down. I hate to tell you that, friend. It's just the truth. It's just the way it goes. And painting it, as a terrorist organization and leaning on your military service as if it gives you some sort of credibility, in that statement is silly. It doesn't make what you're saying any more true. It actually makes you look like an idiot. Steve Briggs says Iran's only viable strategy is to make it through the U.S. midterms and hope Congress shuts the war down. I mean, they've got a long wait. They would have a long wait at that point. Seabass says, thank you for breaking that down, Matt. I've been watching you since the day one of the war. Just been very disappointed on how the U.S. has been handling the Ukrainian-Russian war. Me and my wife almost got hit by a Russian drone. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty upset over the way the United States has been handling it. Joe Biden, dude, Joe Biden was the freaking worst thing that ever happened to Ukraine. And I mean that, seriously. I was watching this crap very, very close back then, reporting on it very heavily. And I remember watching and hearing from my friends on the front line that they're running out of arms and ammunitions back in, August, September of 23, running out of ammunition to defend themselves against Russia. And Joe Biden and the Democrats, what they actually did was they took the Ukraine funding and the Israeli funding, by the way, for that year. It was after October 7th. They took the Ukraine funding and the Israeli funding and they balled it up underneath the U.S. border bill that they wanted passed, the border bill. Meanwhile, soldiers over in Ukraine weren't getting what they needed. And the Republicans held up on it because the border bill gave a freaking like basically created a super highway from Mexico into the United States of America for illegal immigrants. So eventually a standalone bill for Ukraine funding came through, and it passed pretty much unanimously. Same thing with the funding for Israel. But what the Democrats did was they chalked it up saying that it was Ukrainian funding. And what RT did was put out, because Trump told the Republicans in Congress, if you guys pass this bill, you're not going to have my support when I become president. And so what Russia did, what RT did, was took that and told the lie, saying that the Republicans were 100% against Ukraine, and that so was Trump, because they were freaking against funding the Ukraine war. And that's not true. Like I said, the bill itself, the standalone bill, passed unanimously. But what that bill that the Democrats that were trying to push through had was a superhighway that was being created. That is where the Trump hates Ukraine, that is where the Trump supports Russia started. That day on that bill, when he made that phone call and he put out that message to the Republicans in Congress and said, do not vote for the border bill because the Ukrainian funding was tied up underneath it. That's where that message started. And so it's very important, like I said, to have facts. Too many people are looking at things trying to claim that it's one thing versus the other, and they don't even know the history behind all of this stuff and where it came from. Most of the crap that you see being pushed, honestly, is Kremlin propaganda. Incog Faraday just says, bring it, bro. James Power says, more vet bro propaganda BS tonight. No, I got a feeling there's gonna be lots of stuff for me to be going over and debunking, not just vet bro propaganda. But I think we talked about doing that once every 2 weeks. So if you guys enjoyed that stream, looking at doing it. We also, over in our chat, talked about bringing in Nick Freitas. If those of you guys who know who he is, we're actually thinking about bringing him in as well, because not everybody agrees, with not everybody agrees with the vet bro grip that's been coming out lately. Not everybody at all. Oscar Flores coming in, gifting out 20 doll hairs. Thank you very much, sir. Greatly appreciate you. More attacks up in northern Iraq. And this is what I'm talking about. I think that they are 1000% going to be going after the Kurds pretty heavy in the next week. I think we're going to see a lot of fighting between the PMF and the Kurds because of all of this stuff. And there's, tons of videos out there from Solmania area over last night for all the fighting that's been taking place. So that's basically your update for the day, ladies and gentlemen. I've got a lot of other stuff that I could be showing you. And it's important, I think, for everybody to understand, these terror organizations that we're talking about, the PMF, for example, this is crap that they have. They've got freaking drones with guided missiles attached to them. People always, like, when I bring this stuff up, for some reason, they always think I'm blowing smoke and I'm not telling the truth. And the reality is, this is 100% the truth. The reality is that these folks most certainly have, this capability. And it's disgusting to me that most Americans don't even know how strong and powerful they are. And it comes all from the funding of the IRGC. And so it's important, I think, that people end up taking a look at all of that. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me this morning. Thanks for sticking with me. Peace, love, happiness, and God bless. I'm out of here.